back, everyone. We have our second game of the Bryant University Chess Tournament under 1600 section. In this game, I was paired with the white pieces against an opponent named Steve. Steve was in his mid-30s, and he was rated about 1250. His rating is much more indicative of where his skill is. I played through this round quite quickly. This game actually only ended up being about 35 minutes, and Steve was actually rather upset after our game. He did not shake my hand after the game, but he did before, and he actually withdrew from the tournament after our game. So this could be the beginning of his villain arc, and that's completely fine. From someone like me, I don't take any of this too personally, and people come in and they make mistakes, and it's no big deal to me. But anyway, this game started off with d4, d5, and bishop f4, called the London system. This is my preferred system going into my games with white. Depending on their setups, sometimes I like to take it into a more Queen's Gambit style with c4, and other times I like the more traditional setup that kind of looks like that. Now, my opponent develops normally with knight f6, and we continue our development trying to build our pyramid in the middle to house our beautiful light squared bishop. After this, our opponent plays c5, we respond with c3, and our opponent develops with knight c6, and we are going to develop our knight fighting for some control of the central square. This e5 square is the most important square in the London. If you relinquish control of that square, many of the plans go downhill. So I want to make sure that I have a strong hold on e5 throughout the game. The next move, he plays bishop to f5. Now this move typically tends to weaken the b7 pawn because you're removing a defender, and I like to make this target with my queen attacking onto the newly weakened pawn. Typically, if they have not developed their c-pawns, then I will push c4 and turn this into a Queen's Gambit, but since we've already developed our structure, they are going to be the one that can kick me out if they so choose. However, my opponent tries to trade queens here, which is a noted mistake because of the move d takes c5. His queen cannot recapture because then I will start attacking everything in his position, and he will lose material. So I take a pawn for free, and he chooses to trade queens. Now I'm cleanly up a pawn, and I have open sightlines with my rook. If he chooses to advance, I can defend, or if he advances more energetically, he's going to lose a pawn while grabbing this one. He decides to advance and try and survive in this position. He develops his bishop, hoping to castle, and I follow suit. I'm trying to get my pieces into the game, hopefully castle, and build up pressure onto this A file. He castles, I develop, and here he is fully developed and decides to lash out. He plays A5, trying to break down this structure and hopefully trade off rooks and try and take advantage of my rooks not being connected yet. In this position, I play B4, not allowing him to open the file and forcing his knight to move. Now, the knight's not really in a great spot because it can't move forward. So that means it's forcing a retreat, and if it retreats backwards, it's disconnecting the rooks. So the most natural move that I thought was the move he played in the game, knight to A7. After knight A7, I had to take a small think because this move disconnects his defense of this pawn, although it opens an attack onto this pawn. So I considered B6, C6, B5, rook takes, and castles. I didn't like C6 because after takes, I ended my calculation and I no longer was up a pawn. However, the better line here is takes, push to dislodge this knight, and note that his rook cannot defend this square that the pawn is going to promote to. So after the knight comes forward, say, we can even just push our pawn, promote, take an exchange, and come rolling in with an attack. However, I decided to play a more concrete approach, not seeing that from a distance. I decided to take. He captures back, and I decide to castle, and I'm having plans to try and build up pressure on this knight with a pin onto his rooks after I double up. My sneaking ideas here are to try and find a way to trade off his dark square bishop to prevent his defense and try and really get this attack on the open file through. In this position, he took a couple minutes and played a move that I really, if you gave me 10 guesses in this position, I couldn't have picked out the move that he chose. He chose knight to E8. Now, I knew this move was bad because disconnected his rooks, and now this knight is under a pin already. So all I need to do is dislodge this bishop and then push. And I can pretty easily win a knight. But I need to act fast or else his knight is going to re-enter the game. So in this position, I decide to play E4, sacrificing a pawn that can be taken two different ways. with the idea to bring my bishop back and trade off his bishop and win the knight. Now, if bishop takes, I can continue with my plan, and even after take, we're in a winning position. If pawn takes, like in the game, then suddenly we have activated another piece into the attack, and my knight is threatening to jump in with a fork. So in this position, he is trying to dislodge me. He plays b6, and this move doesn't do much because once I move back, he still has all of the exact same problems that he had before, and he actually ends up playing this move, knight c7. Now, after seeing two knights like this, and he didn't address the fork, I am having thoughts about somehow dislodging this pawn and getting a nice pawn fork onto these knights. My mouth is watering at the fact that once he moves his rook, I'll be able to take, and push. I go through with this plan, play knight d7, rook d8, knight takes, and pawn takes, and finish it off with a nice little fork. This is where my calculation ended, and I figured that I would be okay. I figured I'd be winning a piece and enjoying my life. He plays knight to d5, attacking my undefended bishop, and if I move, then he would be able to escape with his other knight. Now, I had my one and only big think for this game. I considered just taking, or moving, defending, or even moving and moving. My final decision actually was on a spectacularly fancy move where I ignore everything going on in the position and I play rook f to a1. Now the computer really doesn't like this move because obviously I'm giving up a free bishop, and after I take on a7, I'll give up another free bishop with check. I'm losing a lot of material, but I figure that even losing all of this material, I can come bombarding through and make a queen at the end of everything. The computer finds a good way to defend it, but my opponent really starts to crack under the pressure. They take my free bishop as I expected, and I will take a knight on the way out. Now the computer suggests for them to get out of the way instead of trading. My opponent can take a free bishop with check, but it leaves them with all of the exact same problems they had earlier, except now their knight is going to be hanging, and it would just be an even trade. My opponent decides to take, which is not backed up by the computer because of takes, and if he takes the bishop now and is forced to retreat, I can queen, and if he chooses not to move, chooses to go there per se, I can take, and I will walk my knight to attack the rook and promote. So he chooses none of the above, chooses to prevent the queen, and my bishop maneuvers to attack this rook, and there is absolutely no recourse. He cannot prevent my bishop from going to c6. He actually ends up playing knight to g6, bishop c6, and he resigns in this position. Because if he takes, then I'm up a full rook. There's really no reason to keep playing, and if he defends, I will make a queen, and it's the same idea. It's just a couple tactics. I was winning for most of this game. I played very well. There was a moment or two in here where he could actually defend himself. I believe that it was here, oh, oops, it was here, back, here, there. Then in this position, instead of freaking out over this fork, he has to play it cool, calm, and collected, taking the pawn and threatening this rook. So that if I take, now where he's simply up a pawn, his knight is defended, and his bishop is defended, and his rook is out of danger. Computer still slightly likes my position here, but it's much, much more competitive than what happened in the game. Honestly, even here, instead of playing b6 and going for a fork, could have gone into some complications with bishop takes. I initially threw out bishop takes because it's defending my knight. So if bishop takes, rook takes. But the thing that I had overlooked is we have our passed pawn that is trying to become a queen. And even though I give up a bishop, I can honestly, I don't even need to take this knight. I can probably just push, make a queen. Now, here it's things are getting very desperate, and he would need to give up some material. But yeah, this was a good game. I played fairly well. This move, rook f to a1, very fancy, not very sound, but good enough to make my opponent implode, and the game ended shortly after.